Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, February 13th Planning Board meeting for the town of Raymond. The Planning Board will come to order. The board does have a quorum, and we'll start with a roll call down your end.
Mike Angelo here.
Bruce Sanford.
Greg Foster.
Robert O'Neill.
Kevin Woodbury.
And with us tonight is our Scott Dvorak. How'd they go? Did they do it?
Good.
All right, code. Jim Seymour as in planning, and Mary is taking our minutes. This is a public proceeding unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session. You have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all of the exhibits that are presented. Please notify the chairman if you're unable to hear or to see. The board works from a published agenda, and we will be considering tonight's items in the following order. We have no projects to review this evening, so it's a workshop for some ordinance work. We'll finish with some planner communications. I'm not going to read the rest of this because it doesn't apply this evening. So we shall get going. So to start with, I would just like to welcome our new members. Thanks for joining us. Just kind of a little procedural thing. I'm not sure, well, you've seen the tape, so you know, but probably better than I do. But we basically, for a project presentation, we allow the individual to present that project. Then I will ask Jim to give us the town's version and anything that has been coordinated beforehand. And then the board will ask questions, and then back and forth to the applicant. There's a last sentence in this thing that the lawyers give me to read that says, "All persons speaking shall address the chairman." I just don't do that. It's because I prefer kind of an informal at all possible, and I don't like to squash.
Never seems to work that way
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, I say it anyway, but you know, but I do reserve that right just in case things start to get redundant and we need to move the meeting along. But please do not hesitate to ask questions. Whenever you kind of feel like it. So that's that. The next thing is due to some kind of poor planning on my part before I got back on the board, is I am going to miss, for sure, the April meeting and probably the March meeting. My goal was to ask Ed to make sure he was comfortable stepping in. And I'm assuming that's okay, but I would like a plan B just so Mary knows who to talk to, and in case Ed is not comfortable stepping in. So I have twisted Bruce's arm, and I guess after the second arm, and before I got to the legs, he agreed to be acting for 2 months until I got back. So what I'd like to do just to start off is, since we have a quorum, is a motion to appoint Bruce as acting chair for, what is this, February, for March and April. Does that sound okay with everybody? Second? Okay,
Just have one question.
Yes, shoot.
As a protocol issue, we do have a vice chair, so.
And we will leave that if he wants to step in.
Yeah, okay, so basically, his role would be almost really vice chair.
Vice chair.
Okay,
right.
just so we're clear.
Yep.
Just didn't want to step on the toes of the protocol.
No, I didn't either, and I was going to talk to Ed first.
Yep.
I didn't get a chance. Ed kind of, when the last time I talked, was kind of very comfortable being assistant chair, but wasn't sure he wanted to be
Understood?
chair. So
Bruce
Bruce has done this before.
Would you like me to call
Ed?
Ed?
No, I think the board, I think it can get worked out
It can get worked out.
pretty easily. Bruce will just drop to assistant chair and Ed will take over.
Yeah,
I mean,
at this time, we don't, I think we may be back on ordinances, because I don't see anything else coming.
in the works, right. Okay, so, thanks. Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor? Congratulations, Bruce.
Make sure you leave me your little.
I will leave, here you go. Actually, there's two in there. Bruce, I think there's two.
Yeah, I have two. I must have stuck the other one in there.
I gave, last time I gave this away.
Make a copy.
And just for the
No,
new.
it's yours.
I had one other thing too. I noticed that they all have manuals from MMA and they have the town ordinances. Within that, were the planning board bylaws in there by chance?
I believe I put them in the beginning, I won't
Okay.
swear to it.
I just wanna make sure they got a
I
copy.
think I did.
Okay,
You got it, perfect.
so let's move on to our, so I apologize for springing all this in this folder on you. This was kind of my doing. Mary, Jim, and Scott put this together for us on short notice, but it was my goal to be able to work through this evening and get to a point where we would at least be able to direct Jim for ordinance work and maybe get the legal review and get a jump start. For our new members, this has been kind of on our back burner for a while, and it's really, I think we're a little bit behind in it, but it's been, I waited to bring this up until we could get a full board because we were with kind of low members, and I think it was more important if we're going to put some recommendation from us to the selectmen for an ordinance and then to the town, that it get as many views as possible from us before we get going. So that was the reasoning at least. I came in and kind of in the middle, kind of the beginning of this, but not quite the beginning, so I'm going to try to give a timeline, and Scott, Jim, would you jump in when I fumble here? But actually, maybe it might be better if you, Scott, start us off with where the history.
Well, the history was, there was brought forth to the selectmen as initiating a moratorium on type 1 manufactured housing, which is basically a mobile home, 76 or newer, and basically just gave it back to the planning board to see exploratory if they would like to. If they did, what would they have to do to change it?
I don't interrupt you, but I thought it had started with inspections. That was the problem. It was not.
Nope.
Oh,
Nope.
okay, my fault.
Nope. And I said we've already gone through the first 180 days of the moratorium, so
Right.
we only have 180 days left. I mean, we've just been looking at definitions and what should be put in if we're going to pursue this, what's going to be needed in our ordinance.
Okay. So where the first bit of research is that first, in your packet there, the state regulations, which basically is stating that the moratorium that's in effect is not in compliance with what the state has established regulations for mobile homes. So is that,
We can't abolish them
right?
in the zone, however, we can regulate what type of manufactured house
Right.
we want within the shoreline zone.
So that's where we stand right now. So we need two pieces of business. We need to come up with in our discussion, what we want to have this mobile home issue look like. We need to kind of then put that into a change in the ordinance, because the ordinance right now does not, the verbiage is not correct as far as the definitions go of mobile homes, type 1s and type 2s. And then we also need to send a recommendation to the selectmen as to concerning their moratorium on the issue. Okay? And we have 5 minutes to do it. So,
You need a committee of one to get that done.
yeah. So Jim, do you want to start us off, or?
It might be better to have
Yes, Scott?
Scott.
Okay.
On the type 1 and type 2 question.
Yeah, because currently, right now, in the shoreline zoning, there's no definition of either type of manufactured housing. So we would need to put the definition, we've taken the ones out of the state, how they define those. There's type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is those constructed after 76, commonly called newer mobile homes. Basically, it is your today mobile home. It's goes by 14 feet wide, can only be 750 feet or more, and it goes down by chassis, and how it's it can be mounted on with or without a permanent foundation. The other one is type 2, which is basically a modular home. Those are the ones that come in pieces. They're constructed on the site. There are a little bit different. Some of them, they have a flooring system, and other ones can be modular and be mounted on a slab with no flooring system. And they basically have to be brought in pieces. They have to be put on a foundation. And basically, we need to include those two types of definitions. And the other thing that we would have to change, like for me, would be the residential dwelling unit. As it stands now, it mentions that term shall include mobile homes. So if we're going to change that, we've got to be able to have to take that word out of there. That
The mobile homes and
Mobile
the
home and put type.
type 1 or type 2.
yeah, or yep.
Okay.
And just to be clear, that's all in the shoreline zone, or is that in both ordinances?
Well, manufactured is in the regular land
Regular
use. It is not in
ordinances.
the shoreline zone.
Okay. So the dwelling would be,
As far as what we would,
where would we change that? Would it just be the shoreline zoning, or would it
yes, just be the shoreline zoning. Because if you, land use has rural and rural residential both allow type 1 or mobile homes currently.
Should we clean up everything to say type 1 manufactured homes or type 2 manufactured homes?
In the definition, yes, we could throw something in there that,
So that all through the ordinances, they're not, type 1 mobile homes or mobile homes or,
well, yeah, I mean, they're both under manufactured housing, but you could do, say that it includes a modular housing unit and then kind of quickly define it, but
well, in the non-shoreline zoning, both types would still be allowed.
in certain zones.
So it's only the shoreline zoning that the type 2 would be. So what we'd have, so I would suggest you keep the mobile home definition, break it down so that you have both type 1, type 2, and then when we get to shoreline zone, put the exemption in there that type 1, or flip it around that only type 2 could be allowed.
So can I ask, in shoreline zone, I take it, I'm just guessing here because of cost of land and that sort of thing, there's probably very little demand to put a mobile home in a shoreline zone?
Well,
Is that not true?
what happens, I can answer, what happens is Raymond adapted 600 feet back from shoreline, which the state only goes back 250. So that would basically, yeah, that would probably move both of those out of there. There wouldn't be a chance of a mobile home because of the lot, expensive. But now that we're going back 600 feet, now we're getting on the other side of the road or the camp road. So there, now you're gonna run into people that cheaper lot, they may put a mobile home on there or may want to. And then that's why we would have to change the definition that they could not be put in there. 600 feet kind of is a big net.
Yeah, it does. And we haven't had many, but we've got
I've had one,
situation.
I had one that was very close to it. The corner of his lot was in shoreland, where the rest of it wasn't where he was putting it, so he was fine. But and it was, like I said, it was back from the lake far enough that you wouldn't think that it would have, the prices of the lot wouldn't be as high as it would be for a shorefront.
You think I know what you're saying. You think the marketing would almost kind of address that issue, but we've had a case or two where that has not been the case.
I'd also be a little curious, so we're, as a planning board, of course, we represent everyone in Raymond, so we're trying to protect, I take it, property values, so that we don't end up with mobile homes right next to an expensive property?
That's one portion of it. I think the other one too is the constructability. I know we talked about inspections, but some of the 76 mobile homes, you don't have the inspection capability as well.
Yeah, basically it just states that those ones built before 76 weren't under HUD manufacturing standards. But I mean, to your point, as far as, I mean, it come down to, I really couldn't answer that one as just as well as, I think, but just trying to keep it for code-wise for me, as far as answering to that question.
So, since you brought it up, the board, when they first came to the board, the membership of the board at that time was pretty much opposed to restricting, would be to go with, to more with the state, make sure that their inspection, it was a post 76, it was fine to be put in. But that was then, and I'm not sure how we feel about it now, and that's why I was kind of waiting for everybody to.
I think the key there is the inspection. I don't know why we're not allowed to inspect.
Correct. They are inspected by where they are built. Certifications. I have no jurisdiction inside of manufactured housings once they
Even
come
if
on.
it's been moved from another location?
As long as it's been moved from another location, however, if they do any kind of
Well, how would you know that,
modification
though,
on it.
unless you inspect that?
Well, that is it. I mean, unless I'm privy to that information, I really wouldn't know if whoever bought it did anything unless they told me.
So we're not allowed legally to, if it's from another
I can
location?
look at it and I can make recommendations, but I can't deny an occupancy permit for it.
It was
They'll
kind of
come
a
in.
well-adapted lobby group that got to the state and put that into state law under the mobile home or the manufactured home.
They are inspected.
They are inspected.
They are
Well,
certified.
when they leave the
When
plant,
they're-
right, but I'm saying once they've left the plant, we
Yeah.
have no idea, so I would think if it's coming from it's been used once and moved,
Right.
it should be inspected,
I mean, sometimes when it's-
recertified.
Right.
I mean, when one does come in, I mean, I had one just recently. I mean, I'll do a walk through it, just more of a courtesy inspection than it is anything else. And sometimes when you're looking at them, I mean, sometimes you can have an idea that this probably wasn't done in the shop, so to speak. But it's hard to tell unless you're notified either by whoever sells it or by whoever buying it and moving it there that it has been rehabilitated.
But I don't think the state ordinance addresses a resale, right? It just addresses the inspection.
Well, it addresses, I mean, basically they just have to make sure that they pay the sales tax before it's moved into this, wherever it's moved to, that the taxes are current before it's moved off the property, wherever it is. That has to be paid before it can be put on another lot. But there's no,
But I think your concern is a second sale, is that, or is that what you're?
Well, yeah, once it's been lived in at a certain location and somebody has modified it, we don't know, and then it comes here, we don't even know if it's structurally sound anymore.
So that wouldn't be a module, that would not be,
it would still be, well, he's still talking about type 1.
Type 1,
We're still talking
type
about
1,
type one,
right,
right.
yeah.
And I think the other thing too is, to Mike's comment down there was, when this came down from the select board, I think it had a lot to do with property value on the shoreline zoning and how one of these could affect the other properties. I think the other thing was a little bit of a stigma about the construction type, whether it's on a full foundation or whether it has a skirt or it's on an axle. So a lot of those things did play into that concern. But obviously, that's why they dropped it on your lap.
Does the industry have any standards for re-inspection of an existing?
Well, only that in my talkings with them is that if anything has been done in it, then I can look at it. As far as the modification, if they've put in if they've done something to it structurally, took out some walls, but like again, without not knowing what it looked like when it first come off the floor after it was inspected the first time, I really don't have any way of knowing.
Do you have that?
Well, you
That's a
know,
good
but
idea. That's
I
a good-
wonder if
good
the
point.
industry does, if the industry has any kind of re-inspection criteria, it doesn't.
No.
Okay.
Once
So
it
does
leaves
it-
it, that's it.
Does it come with credentials saying this is what it was? when
This is what it
moved?
was, what zone it was built for. Was it a winter zone? That's on the plate that's in the
Snow load and all that.
Well, yeah, the snow load, because they go by different standards than I do in my building codes. It's a lot. It's not they go by 50 pounds, we go by 70 for snow.
For this,
Yeah.
Scott, this inability to not inspect has nothing to do with septic systems, has it? You're free to inspect those.
Oh, yeah, everything, I mean, I look
It's
at
just the structure itself.
I can look at the sewer hookup as soon as it exits the modular home, I go call underneath and I can see how it's fitted, make sure that's properly connected. I see basically before they're in, there's what they call a sub slab where they have plumbing pipes buried underneath the slab. I look at that. I can look at the water coming in. It's supposed to be wrapped in heat tape. But that's basically what I had is the modular home that I'm speaking of, somebody from the state come down and inspected it. And I don't know if that's something new that they're gonna be doing on new installs only though, but I just look at what they require. And when I do one on an existing, say a trailer gets moved down here, I can make a recommendation that they do some stuff, but I can't tell them they have to.
Was that true with type 2, or do you have more latitude with
Nope,
type 2?
type 2 is the same thing. It's all pre-inspected. There's stuff, like I said, there's stuff plumbing wise that's not allowed under our plumbing code, but it is allowed under the manufacturing.
It's pre-inspected, but how do you, I mean, if it's, I can understand this for maybe if it's one of those modular ones where the big chunks go in, but the ones where you're putting walls in place and everything, don't you have some?
Well, if they do that, I mean, if it comes just the frame only, yeah, there'll be an electrical inspection because they'll have to run wires. It's something that's not done in the shop, so to speak. If it's done on site, then yes, I can look at it. A lot of times mobile homes, type 1s will have, they'll want to put a deck on.
But you inspect the foundation, everything that's going on.
I can see the slab. I can see the slab before they pour it, what they're putting in for reinforcement, where they have to have tie downs. I have to make sure that that's all in place. That's just for me, it's just a foundation, a septic inspection, and then a final.
So we have the same issue outside of the shoreline zone? You still can't inspect?
Yep, it doesn't matter where they're going. It's just the manufactured housing alone. I mean, if I can refuse to do a CO, but even if I did that, the manufacturing housing board can issue one for that if it's a new one, even if I don't agree with the window size or whatever in there.
So it sounds like our focus on shoreline zoning is really protecting property values, it seems to me, which to me makes sense.
Well, it's actually in the code. It says that right there, economic values of adjacent properties.
Mm-hmm.
It affects it.
Maybe we need to change the shoreline zone, make them more normal. Probably should have done that to us in the first place, 600-foot shoreline zones.
But that was your motion.
No, that's a whole different issue. That was another.
You didn't even want shoreline zone. You're kidding me about it. You didn't even want to say the word.
Inappropriate shoreline zoning.
Well, I mean, the whole Cape is
Well, the
under
whole Cape
shoreline
is
zone.
shoreline zone. That's 1,000 feet, so.
Yep.
And you're not allowed to cut trees too.
Well,
It's
it's different. It's been changed.
All right. So,
So the recommendation is to adopt type 2 in the shoreline zone, modify the definitions of dwelling and manufactured housing to include both type 1 and type 2.
Definition.
you can't get around the inspecting. But so,
Doesn't sound like it.
No. Nope. I've already talked to the manufactured housing, one of the members of the board up there, and it's,
yeah, they're not gonna.
once they look at it, that's it.
Right.
So there would be no way to put in, like, they have to sign a statement saying it hasn't been modified, or, so,
Well, you can, but I mean, it's not gonna really mean anything, basically, because we used to have, you could not do a survey, just let you sign this affidavit saying that you gave up, you
Rights.
signed over rights to, that you decided on your own not to have a survey, but I mean, it gives you a little bit to fall back on, but it isn't much, nothing with teeth in it anyway.
Any other thoughts? So we're going to leave modular homes in our definition. We're going to expand it, we're going to leave mobile homes in our definition. We're going to expand it to be type 1 and type 2s.
Manufactured, right?
Yeah,
Manufactured.
Manufactured.
Manufactured, okay.
Yeah,
right.
manufactured housing.
Manufactured, right. We're going to have type 1s and type 2s in our zone, in all of our zones, except for shoreline zoning. Shoreline zoning, we're going to have type 2s.
We'd modify the definition of dwelling unit.
Modified dwelling unit.
And the only other one out of shoreland zoning where they're not allowed is village residential, which is basically right downtown. They're not allowed there as well.
And our type 2 is our modular home.
Correct.
Okay. That comes in pieces or comes,
Well, that's the definition of it. You could come in one or more pieces and that could be part of the definition and is constructed on site. You know, that it's shipped in, you know, basically it comes in two or more pieces
Right.
instead of one.
okay.
You could put the 2 or more in there.
They're bolted together.
Yeah, very, yeah. There was one from another town, I think they had, oh, where was that? Right here. That's just, they just listed it, they don't allow mobile homes in this town in this area. And their definition was that it's a building design or used as living quarters for one or more families. The term shall not be deemed to include hotel, motel, rooming house, or mobile home, but shall include a manufactured housing unit consisting of 2 or more units, which either unit is not a complete unit.
Dwelling unit.
Yeah, a complete dwelling unit.
So basically you get 2 pieces, once you put them together, now it's
That's
a
a
dwelling unit.
dwelling
All
unit,
right.
but not prior to.
And there is no type of modular home, a type 2 modular home that would arrive that allows us to put an inspection criteria on it.
Well, there was, like what Kevin had talked about, there are certain types that are just a framed wall that stood up on a slab.
So do we need to put that?
Well, that would just fall in your.
That would just fall underneath it when they get an electrical permit for that
Okay.
would be an inspection.
Electrical or plumbing?
Yeah, electrical and plumbing. Yeah.
Okay. Would that be obvious, though? I mean, would that,
Yes.
it would be,
Yeah.
It's just a shell.
Yeah, yeah, because there would be an insulation inspection as well that I'd have to do as well on that. So there would be several inspections if they just shipped just the bones of the house, so to speak.
yeah, I understand that, but what would the purchaser understand the difference between when the inspection would be required and when it wouldn't?
Yeah,
be
well,
required?
they would be notified of that when they drop off the permit and when they pick up the permit as well.
I
Okay.
attach an inspection schedule.
They still have to get a-
permit
even if it
that tells them what
comes-
they have to do.
Okay,
Even if it comes to 1, they still have to get a building permit.
yep. No, I just wanted to make sure that
No, understood.
we didn't catch by surprise. Does that sound okay with everybody?
Scott, do you, and maybe you haven't done this at all, and that's fine, I'm just curious, do you have any language from any other town that you're really comfortable with, that we could simply adopt?
No, nothing, this is kind of a unique
Yes.
situation here, so, I mean, there's a few, basically, I mean, you try to make it as simple and direct as you can.
What really happened was, the shoreline zoning language came from the state, so everybody's language is almost identical.
Gotcha.
Why can't we adopt the state definition? Is that too much language? Is that?
Well, for the type 1 and type 2, that's what we
That's
wanted to
had.
include.
That's what we did have.
Yeah, we want to include that. We just would have to change our definition in shoreland zoning of what is a dwelling unit.
Okay,
We have that language, the only change would be is that the state model allows the type 1 and type 2.
Right.
We're just gonna limit it to the type 2.
Yeah, and we want both definitions in there just so it's clear to, say, anybody that wanted to look at our ordinance, they knew that what type was 1, what type was 2, what was allowed, what isn't allowed.
Or somebody with grandfather has an existing.
Yeah. That would, I mean, that'd fall under non-conforming
Right, now
structure.
it'd be non-conforming, right?
Yeah.
And I think this would be one, maybe I speak for Scott, that once we compiled that definition, we'd run it by council.
Right,
Can we make the definition exclusionary? It's currently a dwelling unit in the shoreland zone, and just make it exclusionary, that it may not be a manufactured home type 1.
Yes, that's what we plan to do.
Yep, put that in there.
That's exactly what we plan to
I
do.
mean, you still have to define it as a place to cook, and
Right.
you've got to get that definition in there as well. Yep.
That was the plan.
Okay, everybody, so going forward,
We'll
turn it into,
hard.
Language?
Yeah, language, then we'll run it by,
send it to the lawyers?
sent by Phil, so we're sure
Yeah,
that
Phil.
Phil Saucy, make sure we're covered
Okay,
legally.
and what is our timeline?
Well, I think we'd want to bring this back in March for public hearing.
Hmm.
So we want
Doesn't
to,
mean you can't make changes still, but we'd like to host the public hearing. And if there were no changes, then we could pass that on to the Board of Selectmen.
so do we
I don't
have,
think we want to go into April.
No, I
It's
agree.
gonna
Do
push it too close to the meeting.
do we have projects coming down the road for March?
Right now, we have nothing.
Okay, so we could use the March meeting for the public hearing?
Correct, that's what our suggestion would be,
Does that sound okay? Kevin, all right? Okay,
for all these various.
for everything,
changes,
yeah. Good.
We
Right.
haven't adopted the moratorium yet, have we?
Yes, we have.
Oh, we have?
Yeah,
Oh,
the
we
town
have.
just revised or extended the
Extended.
extended
Yeah,
moratorium. The first one ended in January?
I think so.
Yeah, so they just extended it again, so really we have to nail it down in this next 6 months, which would take us basically to the town meeting.
Right, which I don't think the selectmen don't want to do anything anyway for the town meeting.
No,
No.
that just kind of makes it be, that it just wraps up at the same
Right.
time.
Okay. Everybody happy? Happy? All right. The next thing in your packet there was something that I asked, where'd it go?
Well, we've also got other shoreline zone, should we just go quickly through that?
Oh, you want to do that first? Sure.
That list?
The memorandum.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so we'll hold off on the
I
memorandum.
thought you put it right back here again.
Oh, it's right here.
Do you want to go through this one then? This? Yep, okay.
These are really, and I'll let Scott go through this because he had the conversation with Mike Morris, who went through this when we adopted it, and there were some typos and some minor clerical language issues we had to clean up. So these were his comments and requested that we get these corrected into our shoreline zoning ordinance.
Yep. They are currently, there is a couple definitions that are missing, but they gave us the okay to use what we had, even though it wasn't exactly correct, with the understanding that the town would adopt it by the June meeting.
Oh, so these are the state recommendations?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
all right. So we don't have a lot of choice.
No,
I think they're all really good.
yeah, I mean, basically, they were just,
You're so
they were
PC.
missed from the guidelines. That just got missed,
Yeah.
and they put them in.
And then we did have, so we'll do that, let's do that in one chunk, and then we've got a few other clerical and additional items we want to address as well. So let's just take up the shoreline zoning clericals first.
These are the four things you've got here that you're
I
talking about?
think they're on the first
4 pages?
2 pages, and then the other 2 are changes to the land use ordinance.
Land use ordinance, okay. All right, so shoreline and shoreline.
And I think the definition was net density. Was that one?
Yeah, net density for duplex.
That's a different issue.
Yeah, that one, I don't, yeah, we can get to that. Is that what they want to talk about now, or?
That's another issue, but I'll let Scott talk about that, but you just want to go over with what the DEP, was there specific definitions or,
Yeah, there were, let's see.
which I don't know if you actually have. Any.
Jim, I don't have, oh, I see, never mind.
These are all the conditional approvals. Let's see if it just starts back here.
Jim, you're talking about the DEP is on our sheet of paper here. The one that came back from
Right.
the state was the second and third item, the typo
Correct.
correction,
Yep.
and the Must Spring shoreline zoning
Yeah,
ordinance.
the top one is a
Okay.
net density, which is a separate shoreline zoning issue, which Scott will,
And that did not come from the state.
that did not come from the state.
Okay.
And that's another issue that's kind of popped up. The other 2 at the bottom were corrections. One was a simple typo on the adopted date of the Board of Appeals powers and duties. The middle one is the one that Scott has here, which has all the conditions and language the DEP wants, which to your point, you're correct, we pretty much have
Yep.
to adopt. So those are the two for that. The first one that you had on your sheet, which is net density, you just want to,
it was just a matter of thought. What the state requires is there's a minimum lot standard, but our shoreland zoning exceeds that for any new lot created. But what isn't addressed in our shoreland zoning, but I don't know if there's even a lot out there that exists that would create this issue. But currently, if they wanted to put a duplex on there, the only requirement they have is double the road frontage, not double the lot size.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's really worth putting in there, because I really don't know if there's a lot out there that exists with
so the
450
scenario would be you
road
got a
Yeah.
frontage.
2-acre lot
Right.
for a dwelling unit. But if the lot had,
They had 3 acres and 400 feet of,
Right.
450 feet of road, he could put a duplex there, because he only has to meet the road frontage.
It seems to me we really ought to do it, because that's the one lot that's gonna pop up and. To me, it makes sense, it'd be a lot cleaner and it would,
Well, because, I mean, I had run into it before on another issue. A gentleman asked the question, and I asked the previous code officer. And he goes, well, you look in there, there should be double the lot, and it's not. All there is just the road frontage.
so the only change would be that not only do you have to have double road frontage, you'd have to have the double lot requirement, double lot area requirement.
Yep.
So that's the only change would be to the shoreline zone for that.
In which case, if you double the lot size, it would become a conforming lot, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, it would, as far as, if, say right now their LRR1 allows for a 2-acre lot, there could be, like I said, there could be a lot out there that has more road frontage than it does, because it would need 4 acres to put a duplex on there,
If we were to change the
if we were to
definition.
change the definition.
Right.
But right now, they could literally have 450 feet of road frontage in a 3-acre lot, and they could put a duplex on there. Whereas if they were anywhere else, they would have to have double the lot size.
Why is that wrong?
What's that? Well, a lot of it, sometimes if you have a real small non-conforming lot, like I said, I don't know if there's one even out here
Say
that
you
would
had,
have the
I
road
mean,
frontage.
so say you even had, a 2-acre lot, or a 2.2-acre lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you had double the road frontage, you could split that and put a duplex, right? Or you could put a duplex on that.
Yep. Yep. I mean, like I said,
I mean,
Geometrically, that'd be pretty hard.
it'd be,
Well,
that's
that's
what
what
we're
I mean.
saying.
Yeah, I don't know if there's one out there anymore, because one of the things that Town of Raymond has is any lots are
You'd
created.
have to have a long, skinny.
Yeah, they try to shy
Big
away from that.
U-shaped
Right.
thing, or,
Yeah, it's really hard to make a lot that would meet that now anyway.
right, because if it was long and skinny, then you wouldn't have the setbacks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Like I said, I mean, it just came just in,
but there may be one that's 3.9 acres, too. Which is more likely.
I think it also kind of goes against, I wouldn't say it's a goal, but it certainly is a consideration of our cost of housing, right? So that if you're going to make it 2 lots, you're driving up the cost of the individual dwelling. If you're willing to go with 1.3, whatever, or 2.3, 3.1, as long as the road frontage is there, and as long as they can get it to fit, which are 2 considerations that is probably may or may not even be a lot that conforms to those.
true, yep.
You know, to me, it doesn't seem like we need to go through the process of concerning that, but that's my comment.
No, I agree with that too, I don't see why.
Yeah. Is that,
Makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay with that?
again, it's not a common scenario at all.
right, well,
No,
even if it
but-
would come up, I don't see it as a bad thing.
Well, no, it wouldn't may necessarily be a bad thing. There, and the other things may kick in on it too, whether or not they could get the right size septic system on a
Yeah,
small lot
exactly.
like that as well.
Yeah.
So it's not exactly,
Standards are still there anyway.
Right.
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
all right, so let's kill that one. Okay with everybody? All right.
All right, so those were all we had, I believe, in the shoreline zoning.
you want a motion for these two on the shoreline zoning, or are you okay to just?
Yeah, you can just lump them together, that's fine.
Okay.
And then we'll deal with the next one. It's page. Is this one sure it's on, or just the name? Doesn't really matter. Actually, I take that back. The middle one is only shoreline zoning. The typo for the Board of Appeals is in the land use.
Land use, okay.
I mean, it's almost like, I think we can make that one without your, but we just bring it to your attention. It's a
You
clarity.
don't think it was really made in 26?
1826.
Well, Bob, were you,
1826. Hey, of course.
were you here for that one, Bob? You might be the only one that remembers. But no, then we get, I don't know, how do you want to do these all in one lump, or do you want to break them out?
We can do all one
right.
lump.
So the other items that we had in there were, again, Board of Appeals language.
Yeah, it seems.
That one was just so that it wasn't worded once each month, but as needed. Again, just cleaning up some things. Home occupation. Do you want to get to that one? Home occupation.
I don't think the Board of Appeals would care, but did you run that by them, just, do they know?
Yes.
Okay.
That's another one, the next one with the home occupation, that was, we kind of contemplated whether or not, because what it does right now, it just says no retail sales for repaired goods. We, talking to a lawyer, he goes, well, I should say no retail sales, however, we were looking at what's allowed, and one of them is a beauty shop. There's gonna be retail sales in that. So we question as to whether or not, if it should just stay as is, instead of saying no retail sales, because.
I think where you're allowed to do automobile, small engine repair and things like that, I think what the ordinance was trying to avoid was people having a whole bunch of vehicles, whether it be snowmobiles, motorcycles, out in front of the lawns with for sale signs on
Right.
it, I think with the indoor home occupations, there's going to be some accessory retail sales most likely. If you're doing art, or you're doing crafts, or you're doing beauty, there could be some small retail sales. And do we really want to get into eliminating those? It's kind of accessory to the service almost in some cases. So I think it was more for, and maybe that should just say no outdoor retail sales, maybe. I don't know.
I
Yeah,
think
but then
that
you run
language
into that,
about,
though, if he's got his.
Right, well then you run into, what,
guys
no
selling-
retail sales not incidental to the permitted use, something of that effect. Because a beauty shop, they're gonna have shampoo and stuff
exactly,
up there,
exactly, yeah.
yeah.
And if you're in if you're doing crafts, you may have different, materials there. Small engine repair, I think, and again, I think most of that, if it's indoors, I think the other thing is traffic generation. You don't want to have a lot of traffic trips going in and out with retail sales as well. But, on a small homeowner's level, it's probably nothing to, I'm almost at the point where it may just as well leave the language as it is, but I don't know if we've had an issue with that.
There was another
Oh,
thing that kicked it out, but a gentleman wanted a bait shop. And there was nothing in, what happens is there's two different home occupations, one in shoreland, a little bit slightly different. And shoreland says to refer back to the land ordinance, and if it's not specifically named, then it can't be, it's called a conditional use, therefore it'd have to go in front of the ZBA. But in our home occupation definition and land use, it says the following are examples. But in shoreland, I gotta go by what the examples are. I can't go by,
is that good?
so,
Well,
I mean, and that hit, well, he wasn't allowed to have it because it wasn't specifically named in when it said to refer back to the home occupations and the land use. He could have it, but it would be a conditional use, and he would have to go in front of ZBA, which is.
And what you see here is what we see in a lot of ordinances, they're layered over time,
Right.
and I'm sure that wasn't the intent, but that's what ended up as being the end product. So again, you know, we're gonna put, and incidentally, change the definition, but are we going to be affecting other things?
So does our chart say this is a permitted use in all zones?
For the one that you're seeing in front of you, they, like I said, they listed as examples, and then if you went a little
No,
farther.
no, but it's under Article 12, right, which is isn't that our long,
It's,
isn't that the flow chart or the?
No,
the
that's,
check
that's
sheet?
not shoreline zone, that's the regular land use ordinance definition section.
Okay,
So they just, like he said, they use that, when you go to the zoning uses, you'll have home occupation.
right,
Then you gotta go to the definition to see if you fall within that definition, and these were just listed in the definition as examples. But when he goes to shoreline zoning, the examples become it.
specific.
okay.
And I have a question, just the number 7, small engine repair excluding motorized vehicles such as mopeds, motorcycles, ATVs, and snowmobiles.
What's it left, right?
There isn't a lot of difference between a riding lawnmower and
I
a
hear you.
snowmobile.
I
so
know.
Mm-hmm.
That seems kind of arbitrary.
I guess you gotta draw the line somewhere.
Probably difficult to enforce too.
That's the trouble, is that drawing lines in this.
Well, I mean, usually what happens is you come in front of them with a home occupation, they wanna do one, and
Yeah.
that's, I gotta ask them, basically I ask for a write-up as to what they're gonna be doing there. And then by looking at that and see how it falls with home occupation.
I think I like the verbiage of repaired goods shall be permitted better than just
Yeah, just leaving
generally
it as
allowed,
is,
yeah,
yeah.
as is.
Yeah, cause I think it just creates more of a,
Yeah,
Yep.
that's what,
you know,
Anyone else that disagree?
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Just knock it out more.
okay, the next
Go
one,
on.
the next one on your list was, this came a result of older plans that we had that, especially with subdivisions that never die. So we created this, and when we created it, we put it in the site plan ordinance. What we want to do is take the same exact language that's in the site plan ordinance and put it in the subdivision ordinance so it's clear.
Perfect.
It's basically, I think other towns call it as their sunset provision, but just gives you a certain extended period of time to commence or complete the development.
Yep.
What we had, the reason that came about was, I think you were still on the board
Yep.
when that came about, is we had 10-year, 13-year-old subdivisions that are still in the registry. And some of the zonings have changed, but we're kind of stuck because our ordinance at that time said there was no
Can we do it?
limitation.
Right.
So this would allow at least those to come back and start from the beginning. In one case, we had one that was kind of part age restricted
Right.
condo.
Yep.
We didn't have any choice as far as that goes, even though we had eliminated that. All we could look at was whatever they changed in that plan. So now, if that same application were to come before you, it would start from the beginning. And that only applies to plans that you approve now, so still we have those older plans out there. But anything new you approve would meet, well, actually, it already is in there, this is just clarifying it. It's in the site plan notice, but it refers to the subdivision as well. So anything from 2017 on will have this standard apply. Food truck, nothing makes sense.
yeah, it's something we have to figure out.
So that was all of the
That's good.
immediate changes that we had. And then the last one, which you might want to segregate, is the one you asked for, Bob, which was the
That's,
Let's do that one separately.
yes, do that, yeah, I think we'll just do a discussion on that, I don't think we'll get
Okay.
anywhere near, I mean, I agree with your comments there, I think it is a pretty big issue.
It's a
and
tough, yeah.
We'll talk about that in a
Yeah.
second. What about this truck, food truck license, peddler's license?
Well, the peddler license, looking at that, is pretty ancient, the one that we have. They have to apply for it by, I think it's March 1st. And then they have until April 1st, I think, to submit it, and that's it. So you gotta know when you're gonna have like if you want a food truck for your, you gotta know by then, otherwise it's gone, and it also has to go in front of would have to go in front of the selectmen as well to be okayed as a peddler's license. I've had a couple inquiries from businesses that would like to have a food truck out just for a weekend on a special sale. Right now, and a lot of times they don't know it until 2 months ahead of time, 2 or 3 months ahead of time, and by then the timeline is already passed. I know other towns have adopted food truck.
Kind of rolling,
you have vendors,
I
how
think
long
what-
they can be there, and
And obviously, you've seen the increased demand for that type of
Yeah.
service. They're very
Yes,
popular.
right.
You know, I know our companies use them for special occasions.
Mhm.
They come in, set up, do the food, do the ice cream, whatever you want. But overall, that's a growing kind of industry, and it's growing out away from the city of Portland into the rural areas, especially on weekends or special events. So.
yeah, say, because yeah, I would just, you know, something that necessarily wouldn't have to go jump through that many hoops and have it in that, be able to know what they're doing that early in the season when it could change, and you're only allowed 2 per year
The whole town.
in the whole town.
And typically, you would just review that, right? That wouldn't come before us.
Well, that's, would be one of the concerns, you know, there's a certain criteria they'd have to meet, insurance and all that. We looked at some other towns as to what all they would have to have in order. And yeah, basically it would be either reviewed or like a staff review. I'd probably also would maybe even like, I don't know if really the fire department would have to know anything about that one or not.
Mostly it's food handling.
Yeah, mostly it's just food, so, you know, they would have to have their
Yeah, I-
licenses from the state and stuff.
I
And
think in prior times, the concern was, you know, where these would set up. Because most of the time, they set up in public locations.
Mhm.
But now, with the way how food trucks and peddlers work, you know, they'll go into a private company or a private location, you know, or somebody may just want to set up for a weekend as an attraction possibly even. So I think before it was maybe more concern of public competition in public spaces. Now it's kind of tipping into the private properties.
But I would, yeah, I guess that I would be, I think though is still concerned. I mean, if you are, for
Right.
local, you know, our local competition, right?
Right.
They're in brick and mortar and they're paying taxes to the town
Right.
and all that. And
And that
then,
may have to come something that's derived from fees or,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
something to make that difference.
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, some of them have, they can't be within a food truck, can't sell something similar. If there's a brick and mortar store 700 feet away, whatever, they can't be any closer than that.
Mhm.
I think a lot of them know you, the ones basically have been, like Mexicali Blues, like I said, they had just a couple businesses here, but I'm also seeing them now going to weddings, food trucks for catering rather than, and I don't know if that would be,
It just doesn't seem like a planning board action item.
well, it would be a change in the ordinance, we'd have to change the peddler's license or adapt an ordinance for truck vendors. And that
I
would
think the ordinance piece was us, but the licensing probably would be, to your point, would be the select board.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I mean, is which egg, chicken, egg thing here.
Mm.
You know, I mean, it's something that obviously we're not going to alter it, that's going to impact 2019. Because we're not going to have this completed. If you were to even dive into this, it wouldn't be completed till June, and the process has to be completed by April 1st. So 2019 is essentially sailed.
Yeah,
For the
right.
banks.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the question would be, maybe the question would be, do you want us to run this? maybe
By the
we-
selectmen.
By the selectmen.
Yes.
We can just run it by them.
I'd rather by them if, on the license piece, and if they want us to proceed with an ordinance change to
Right.
complement the change in the license, and then we'd take it for action. Otherwise, I don't think it's worth us doing. Is that, you want to speak for everybody, is that okay?
No, that makes sense.
All right.
That's all we had.
Like a couple small ones here and there, but
Yeah.
chickens.
Just typos.
No, we don't have an ordinance for chickens at all.
Oh, chickens. Chickens. We have a fowl ordinance that you want to discuss too.
Just slightly, I've had a couple complaints last summer for chickens running all over the place.
That's what chickens do.
Well,
they-
they're
they
not
grow
always
free-range
wanted.
chickens?
Or they go over
Instead?
the property onto somebody else's property.
Then
I
they're
mean,
really
one of the
free.
things I thought about is
You
if
can have
there's
chicken dinner,
lots
you
of,
know.
yeah,
No harm, no foul.
yeah.
Feed the wildlife.
My wife we had chickens in California years ago, and if they're not in the coop, they go everywhere. You
Yeah.
know, that's just what they do.
Yep. But yeah, I've had a couple complaints about them coming over, and basically what I thought about it was just, instead of getting really strict about it, that if it's a certain size lot and they have chickens, then they gotta be able to keep, whether by a mobile fence or whatever, but they have to be kept on the lot rather than roaming.
Should be happy that it's good tick, mediation.
Yeah, again, though, that's another one of those, when they're, basically the complaint I had was several of them, more than one occasion, they would come over and roost. She's found eggs on their porch along with droppings. Well, when you don't want
The
them,
droppings might be used.
when you don't want them, you don't want them. And
If
I'd
you
like
don't know
to,
the eggs there, it might get a little bad
Yeah.
too.
They also go into gardens and.
yes, they'll
wreak
tear
havoc,
apart
and
gardens
they
and,
are poop machines. You'll have them on your steps, your sidewalk, your porch.
yeah.
We're in Fort Myers, we found 2 duck eggs on our swim platform, right there in the line.
Yep.
And like I said, this is just spurring from they asked if there was any ordinances, and I looked and there was nothing on chickens, how many you can have or anything like that. I don't really think that's an issue, is how many you can have, but maybe that they could be contained on the property, or,
So Scott, I should know this, but do we have animal control here in Raymond?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would that not be their bailiwick and not yours?
Mm,
I'm just wondering if it becomes yours, what the enforcement's gonna be.
Well, I
Set
mean,
up
if
a
they,
fine
basically it'd be
schedule,
just like
or
anything
what
else.
do we-
If I got a complaint, I mean, if I got a complaint that they weren't being restricted to their property and there was an ordinance in there, then I would call the owners of the chickens, and they would, this would be just a warning to keep them up, but if this persists, then there would be a violation order, then something would have to be done that they gotta keep the chickens in, or they go in the pot, one of the two.
How does that work, like with a dog that's roaming around, you call animal control, why wouldn't you do the same thing with chickens?
Yeah,
Well, they
that's
address dogs. They say that you can have dogs. It's the farm animals, the keeping of farm animals in an urban area that we don't. Like I said, I'm just throwing it out there because I've had a couple complaints, and they're asked if there was any. Basically it's followed by, isn't there an ordinance that they got to keep them on their property?
Well, it's an easy answer, no.
Yeah, I said there's nothing I can go and talk to them and tell them that that's
Free
going
game.
on, and that's it. And that's it. You
Free
know.
game, right?
Yeah.
So there's no state regulation on that?
Not
With
to my
dogs, they have to be
knowledge,
leashed
no,
or
because
whatever?
basically you can have, I mean, because then you can have them, and I mean, it comes down to like they're running around, they cause an accident, well, whoever owns that chicken could be
Liable for the, yeah.
liable for what happens. But,
Is it any different than any other?
Yeah,
farm
what
animal?
about all the turkeys that are going all over the place?
No, those are wild.
no, those are wild, yeah. I mean, like I said, this was just spurred on by a couple complaints, so I figured I'd, as I say, throw it up the flagpole, see who salutes.
So in our ordinance for the farm, there's nothing that says they have to be kept with them. Is that what you're saying, we should modify
Well, it's agricultural.
the agricultural law?
Yeah. Like I said, it's, because this is more of a rural area than I think if we were a bigger town, more populated, this would probably be more of an issue, given now that
Well, we do have a permitted use, right? It is
you're
a
allowed to,
permitted use.
it just says you're allowed to keep small animals. It doesn't get very specific at all.
So I guess that wouldn't be too unrealistic to add that in the definition. The permitted use is the animals must be kept on your property.
Contained, right.
Contained on your property. I mean, I don't think that's a big, huge thing.
I almost think that you ask the owner, the property owner, to contain them and and make a note of it, and if it continues, then maybe you do pass it off to the animal control
Control.
officer.
Yeah.
I don't see it as any different than any other,
Animal.
I mean, if you
Yeah, I
have a
don't either.
llama or a cow that do the
Right,
same
right.
thing, I would
Yep.
expect that they would step in and do, it might be limited, but at least it's a little more official, I guess, if the animal control officer comes and says, chicky poo over there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like I said, I think it would be more of an urgency if it was not urgency, but it would be more different if this was a bigger town, more congested, because you have a lot of the going back to the farm, so to speak, and everybody has chickens because they all want eggs.
With that said, my guess is that the coyotes don't know they're running around.
Yeah,
No,
that's
well,
right.
that's what they probably don't, not in an urban area, but
They'll
like
figure it
here.
out soon
They'll
enough.
figure it out soon enough.
Yeah.
And the hogs. All right, so we'll leave that one alone.
Yeah, good.
All right, so do you want a motion for all this? Or are you okay
Just do what
with?
you did before, just basically an acknowledgement that you want us to get it prepared for a public meeting.
Yeah, and I think that's, so just as a recap for everybody, the first, I'm off this 4-sheet paper that, with the red printing at the top. The net density for duplex, we've canceled out.
Yep.
The next one is the shoreline zoning ordinances in compliance with DEP. Those are all state
Corrections.
corrections that they've asked us to make, and we concur. The next is a land use, just changing a date for of implementation of a change, and we're okay with that. The next one being the appeals board, changing the verbiage for when they meet. The appeals board's okay with that, and we're okay with that. We've canceled, the next one is the changing the no retail sales allowed, and we've canceled that out. And the last one being the sunset provisions that we have already on the books. We're just clearing up some verbiage to extend it to the rest of the land use ordinances. And the food truck license, peddler's license, we've passed, kick that one back to the selectmen.
There is one, excuse myself, I know there's always one
Before you
more.
start, is that okay with everybody? Is that a good
Sounds
sense?
good.
Okay, all
I
right.
do have one other scenario, and you know what? Clean that one up, and then I'll come back to this scenario. You already made your motion, I'll come back to the other one. It's my planner's communication.
Oh, okay. So you do what you feel, you feel better with a motion?
Yes, that's fine, whatever you want to do.
All right, so, all those in favor of sending those items as discussed to, to be converted into ordinances for discussion at a public hearing in the March board? Second, discussion, questions, all those in favor?
Yeah.
Done, okay, got the motion.
So the other one that we have, other than the one you requested,
Yep.
is, and it's starting to pop up a little bit more frequently, is special events. And when I say special events, mostly it is weddings, barns, and things like that. And, you know, if it's private, that's one thing, but when the people start to rent the space out, we really don't have anything in our ordinance that really falls into this. It really typically is a commercial use. Except that commercial use is not allowed in a residential zone where most of these barns are held.
Yeah.
And I think that we're not trying to prohibit the use of these barns, but we want to be able to somehow have some regulations or some requirements, because they can be a nuisance if they run on a routine level.
Sure.
So at what point do you want to kind of, you know, we looked at
Is this the
dorms.
Airbnb problem?
Well,
in a-
it's not necessarily Airbnb, this one's more kind of just for special events, barns, large gatherings, almost, I don't want to call it mass gatherings, but large gatherings.
Mhm.
Because you have issues with traffic, you have
Yep.
issues with waste, you have issues with noise and hours of operation. And with the growth of the rural barn weddings, I'm just using that one as an
Mhm.
example, it's becoming more popular. And if people are going to kind of start utilizing that as kind of a limited business, for accessory to their normal business, then it might be a nuisance to the neighbors.
Yep.
And we want to, I'm not saying we need to do it right now, but is that something that we want to start trying to get out and headed? Because I think Raymond is an attractive location for some of those kind of things. And again, we're not trying to prohibit it, we're just trying to kind of corral them so we understand, you know, there's some fire codes that might come into play with that, health and safety, things like that.
Would it be a permitting issue?
I think it would be more of like a licensing issue, where if they did it on a limited basis, it would be a license, but once they exceed that license limitation, then it would be basically a commercial type use.
It's like an event.
Yes,
License.
it's an event license, exactly what it would be, yeah. And where they, and I think what Gorham did was 6 or 8 times a year you could run an event through your facilities or location. Anything more than that, then you got kicked up to the next level, which would be the commercial use, which would be a Board of Appeals conditional use action in a residential zone, which might be fitting if you get to that kind of level. So we do have kind of the Gorham ordinance to kind of go by and look at. Just kind of want to get a sense from the board, you know, if you think that's something that we might want to pursue. And I'm not saying maybe for 2019, but maybe 2020, because I just see that more and more of these are going to start popping up. And I think it's more with the fire department.
Good idea.
Yeah, good idea.
Fire department and traffic management are really the big issues, because and even in Gorham, they limited to, had to be 150 or 250 unless, it was a fairly substantial number. But I mean, if you run an event that big, you've got a lot of parking issues, and really what they try to do was just define, you had to come in with a management plan of how you're going to address these certain issues.
That makes sense.
You know, and right now, we have nothing.
Yep.
So it's kind of, And that may play true with special events, not just weddings, but anything that has a gathering, whether it be a small concert or, you know, a reunion.
food truck?
Possibly.
I was gonna mention, this ties back into the food truck
Right.
question too.
Yeah.
If there are any restrictions that would, you know, for public safety, you can't have a food truck within 20 feet of a street intersection, or, you know, something like
Right,
that, that
right.
you want that transferable to private property usage for the same safety reasons, and that would, you know, possibly tie into.
And the other thing, to your point,
Sister-
maybe just proof
sister
of
ordinance.
insurance for these type of things as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of liability out there. So I mean, I think this is one, maybe we could, to your point, we could group together with the food truck and run it up the pole with the select board.
Is that,
You don't have anything in your packet,
Okay.
we just found this one in Gorham today, but we've kind of been asking around, and a lot of the towns are kind of saying, no, we don't, but, you know, it's something that we're starting to think about as well. So all the towns are kind of looking at that, because a lot of people are supplementing their agricultural use. And
Sure.
in some cases, the agricultural use kind of slips aside and this becomes the primary
Mhm.
use, you know, because it's good money to be made on some of these things. And like I said, we're not trying to prohibit it, we're just trying to find a way to kind of make sure it's done safely and correctly.
I think it's a
Okay.
great
So,
idea, and I think
yep.
it helps all parties, neighbors, the users in terms of safety, but also some of these people that own a barn aren't even gonna maybe think about the potential liability if they don't have it up to snuff and
Right.
something happens.
Right.
So I think we're protecting everybody.
Yeah, and there is, even if you do run the special event, you know, there's a notification process, and it's not cumbersome, it's like 10 days or something like that. And if you're hosting a wedding, you know more than 10 days. Hopefully you know more than 10 days. So that's just something else we'll kind of combine with the food truck and run that through.
even that's 10 days.
Yeah. So the last one is the one that you had
Okay.
me kind of do a little research
Yep.
on, and just a little background. Bob asked me to look into this, and I, believe me, I think it makes all the sense in the world. I have personally lived on a dead-end street at the very, very end, and I now live on a loop road. And I can tell you the traffic on the loop road is still very minor, you know, but I know some people have some very particular concerns about extending dead-end roads to become future loop
Yep.
roads. Traffic, marketability, privacy, those all come into play. But from your standpoint of land planning, it makes all the sense in the world. Only difficulty we had is, which we discussed at the last meeting, and actually, again, Gorham was the one town that kind of pointed it out to me, is that when it comes to reserving that future right-of-way, if it's a private right-of-way, yeah, it's there, but you gotta get two sides to come to an agreement on how it's gonna be used. And the only way this whole thing really works well is if the roads are town accepted.
Right.
Because then the town has that reservation of that right-of-way that can be used by the party or the landowner in the back. In a private situation, it's there, but the two sides have to privately negotiate the use of that. And in some cases, you may be coming back to a homeowners association where, you know, one owner doesn't want it and five do. You've got a battle.
And you have the
on
maintenance issue.
And you've got the maintenance issue. And so I think in some cases, there was another town, I can't remember which one it was, that basically gave the planning board the authority to kind of request to look at that.
I think it was Falmouth,
Might
I
have-
think.
was it Falmouth or was- And I
But-
think that's not a bad idea, and again, I think I put in here my recommendation, is that when we get into cluster developments, you know, we're getting into pretty high density. And maybe in those cases, it makes some sense, because who's to say with these large tract of land that the guy in the back may eventually become another interested party. Whether it happens or not, you at least preserve that. And maybe down the line, the council does start to think about, you know, if we're gonna have loop roads, maybe those become something that the council might, or the select board may be interested in adopting or accepting. Because again, from the town's perspective, for bus trips,
Right.
for maintenance, for deliverables, it's a lot less impact and easier to go around a loop road than it is to go up a dead-end road, turn around, come back out, especially of the town's equipment. Can't imagine. So maybe in those situations, it is a good idea, but if it's private, your hands are gonna be tied.
This was, I can't take credit for the idea. It really came out of a workshop that was done on land use planning 5 years, 6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, when we were going through the rapid development
Yeah.
stage. And the ideas that were put forward there, and Jim kind of put into writing for us, but it was that the town would save a lot of money in both trash collection and bus routes, in the things that the town pays for, if in fact we had connectivity. It would also reduce the congestion on the roads, where you would have lots of subdivisions dumping out onto, in our case, maybe 85 or whatever. So, it's a difficult thing, and we often don't see the follow-on project. What brought it back, we got me thinking about this again, was that project that we just did, where it was indeed connected to another
Oh, that
another
was,
subdivision.
Panther Ridge?
Not Panther Ridge, it was the one,
Which one?
Panther View or
Oh, Westview.
Westview, right,
Westview.
where it was connected to another,
Oak Ledge, I think.
Oak Ledge, where it was connected to another subdivision.
They got a gate on it, though.
Yeah, that's right, yeah, or they
But it
don't
does
have a
connect.
gate on it, but it does connect, but the road really wouldn't be really sufficient to take the traffic from both those. So at any rate, that was where this came from. I didn't mean to spring this all on you, but I thought maybe we could kind of think about this and take a look, certainly not for this year, but maybe kind of keep thinking about it and think about a way we could go, and maybe we could, is you think there's some way we could do some cost analysis in mileage for the
Well,
selectmen?
Yeah, I think the difficulty is, you know,
Pretty hard, it's between
it's
the
pretty hard
assumptions.
because it's a case-by-case scenario.
Yeah.
You know, I think the one thing, I think you could put bullets together to say the pros and the cons.
Yeah.
And cost may be one that goes in one of the bullets. I think one of the big things that may limit it is the multitude of curb cuts.
Right,
You know, if you had loop roads and, you know, or spurs coming off of that loop road. But it all really comes down to how the land configures and everything. It really dictates how the development gets done.
so I wonder if we could then, to the selectmen, ask if they would consider accepting a road, if in fact that we could demonstrate it would,
Right.
it could turn into a loop road
Into a
for
loop
traffic.
road, right. And I think in talking with Nate, you know, his feeling is from a public works standpoint, loop roads, like to your point, are so much easier to maintain and operate on, you know, because you don't have to make that 3-point turnaround at the end,
Mm-hmm,
especially in the wintertime when it's all
right. When the trash
closed
collection,
in.
it's
You know, right now is the worst case scenario, where you've got snow and then you get these flash freezes and ice, and these roads just like this. They're narrow enough where through traffic can go through, but when you gotta make the movement to get in and out, it becomes a little bit tricky.
So the selectmen right now still operating under that we're not taking any roads?
As far as I know, we have
Is
not.
that still where we stand?
We have not accepted, since I've been here, we have not
Yeah.
accepted a road. I don't think anything's even been presented as a town road. I just think it's been just kind of built in that that's.
It doesn't happen.
Oak
So-
Ledge was looking into it. They wanted it, but we talked about it. I told them what the standards would be, and I haven't heard anything back from them, but that was this summer.
Can we get a feeling from the selectmen? Do you go to selectmen meetings?
Pardon?
Do you go to selectmen meetings?
Not very often.
Okay.
No, and again, I think it's more of, to have this happen correctly, it's a policy issue where, you know, we really do need their buy-in.
Yes, I agree.
And I mean, who's not to say it doesn't change again in 10 years, because I'm sure that the concern is the cost of maintenance on those roads for the town obviously gets tipped back to the taxpayer. Where right now it's private, but my other hat would be, at what point does a private road get to the point where the homeowners can't afford it? What happens then? Does the town have to come in and do emergency repairs, and how does that all get? And we're gonna have some roads that are gonna start getting to that tipping
Mhm.
point, you know, and I don't know what the answer is.
All right. So maybe I'll get on their agenda and
Okay.
broach the topic with them.
But at least I gave you some reading materials
Yes.
from other towns to see what they've done, and I know when I work in these other towns, where they have public roads, they're pretty staunch on asking for that connectivity for the future.
This is your favorite town though, right?
It's just my far my
Okay, just
favorite
checking.
town.
Good enough you don't live here.
I do, I lived this one over, I'm as close as you can possibly be.
Moving closer.
Came from Scarborough now to
Yeah,
Gray,
he's
I'm
getting-
getting
he's
there, I'm
getting there.
getting there.
You're scooting a little farther away from you.
I noticed we had somebody in the audience, is there somebody who wants to, is there?
Are you here for a reason, just kind of entertainment?
Well, I am here for a reason. I do have some input with regards to mobile homes being
Okay, we can't,
Well, we'll have a public hearing.
yeah, we have a public hearing in March for that. So it's kind of best if you let it kind of get through, because maybe some of your questions can already get answered. It's probably best if we get it into a format and then,
Or you can just
And
drop
you-
those to Scott and I in the town as well.
yeah, or you could just write.
But some of it's proactive, I mean,
I don't mean to cut you off, but the problem is that since it's not, has not been advertised, and it's a workshop, and it has not been advertised as being open to the public, we get one side, we don't get the other side, and the other side is like, why didn't we get a chance to talk? So, in the,
in fairness, at the last meeting, you said it could be opened up to public comment, so.
yeah,
But if you have questions or comments, feel free to
Yep.
meet with Scott or myself at the town and office, and we'll gladly answer or communicate whatever you have.
do you have just questions about it, or do you have,
No,
It-
I have, it's not a question, I just have, there's some things that you guys didn't talk about, which I wish you had. And
go ahead.
do you want me to go there?
No, just,
When we were talking about the land use ordinance, you had mentioned there's no need to change the verbiage there. I agree, there's a definition of type 1 there, but if you actually look at the articles for rural and rural residential, it doesn't refer back to manufactured 1, it actually talks about manufactured mobile homes with pitched roofs, manufactured in 1976 or later. That does not match the actual definition of.
Actually, that was my point earlier. I said all of the definitions should go back to either
Right.
yeah,
type
Right.
1 or type 2 modular homes.
we got that.
But you guys said you were gonna change land use for that. That's my point.
We should be consistent through all of the.
No, we're gonna, yeah, you see, that's probably why it is best to wait. Yeah, we are gonna change the definitions, but we're not going to change the usage of it in the land use, in the land use ordinances.
All right, maybe we should best wait.
Yeah, I think it'd be best.
Discrepancies there.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and when you'll see the whole package and there'll be plenty to ask. Okay, what else?
I think that's it. You have a couple of, do we have those Mylars to sign?
I have one Mylar.
We have one Mylar.
Is that the
to sign.
Malibu?
Yes, it's
Yes.
Malibu.
Okay.
And the reason that you're re-signing that is, we had a small change. They put instead of a full-blown culvert, they put what's called a rock sandwich in the road, which is basically a crushed stone lens, so the water transmits through that larger porous. It's a DEP accepted BMP, and that's what they chose they wanted to do. We're fine with it.
Okay,
Private road, it's not a town road. Here we go again. But
So is that like wrapped in some
it's wrapped in geotextile fabric, yep, so it doesn't sink in, but there is some maintenance still has to be done, but that's all on the private land.
We did that in 85.
You still have that?
so
State,
I'd like to borrow and make a copy.
who do we need to sign that?
Because I don't.
Who's that? I mean, our board is
Turned it
in
in
flux.
with my manual.
Good question.
Ed, Kyle, and
Ed, Kyle, and
I don't think I was here for that.
Greg and.
Greg was here.
Yeah, Greg was here.
I think Greg's the only one that's been here.
Greg, so Ed, Greg,
Ed
Kyle,
And Kyle,
no. So,
which isn't even a quorum any longer. I don't think it cares on the,
no,
that doesn't.
no.
All right, so you're the only signature
For
for Malibu.
The
Yep.
Malibu, and we'll let the others come in.
Who?
Bruce?
Bruce?
No, he was not on the board
I
for
don't think he
that.
was on the board for Malibu, off Cedar Lane.
I don't
No.
remember.
Oh, was it, how
I
far
thought-
back was it?
I thought, remember.
not that far,
Not
when
that
I
far back.
started.
Oh,
So it's only been a year.
Oh, about a year.
oh, well, you might have been, Bruce.
No, I don't think
No,
he was.
no, I don't think
I
he
was
was.
on the board through December of 2017.
Yeah, and this came in 18.
Okay.
Came in, so.
Have memory failure.
You know, the last site
That's all we
visit I
have.
went on was,
All right. Anything else for anybody?
down Route 302, I think.
You're up.
Adjourn?
All those in favor? Done.
I don't have it, Bruce. I'll look for it.
You know, I may have to
That's
make
the
it
one I
out.
need.
Out of a couple other ones.